everyone, coming to you from our quarantined homes. But before the show, we have a fun thing to talk about. What's going on, Matt?
As many know, you and I have a lot of opinions, and for a long time they've been bottled up. But we're releasing them, and we're releasing them in a wine, in a beautiful rosé. And we want you guys to taste it with us. So join us for a virtual tasting.
Well, yeah, we made the wine with our friends over at Botanist and Barrel, and actually, Lyndon and Amy jumped on a call with us to tell us what it was all about. So, Lyndon, tell us about the wine.
Yeah, so we're putting together our first releases. So the wine we made with you all, which is a rosé blend of Mourvedre, Traminette, and Merlot, all from Yadkin Valley in North Carolina. This is got a really cool label that you guys had custom made. It's called Bottled Up Opinions. And then we got two more wines that are going to be part of our first release. And one of them is a Pink Nat Pinot Grigio. And then the third one is a Mourvedre Paquette that we're really excited about. Which is a sessionable wine that's a little lower ABV.
So you're releasing 3 wines all at once, and we decided to all kind of get together for a virtual tasting on May 28th, which is a Thursday, which is also the day we drop new episodes. So if you're listening right now, it's coming up. So check the link in our show notes. You can check all of our social media for how to get it, but it would be awesome if everyone wanted to buy some wine in advance and we can have it all shipped to your house. How do we go about doing that?
So there's 2 ways. If you're in the state of North Carolina, we want you to just go to our website, which is botanistandbarrel.com. There'll be a link right there on the homepage. We offer home delivery within the Triangle, so Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill region. If you are outside of that region or out of the state, you're going to want to go to vinoshipper.com and just search for Botanist and Barrel Cidery and Winery.
Normally, we would be doing a huge gala ball for the release of our first wines, but because we are quarantined and sheltering in place, we're doing a virtual tasting. So what we'd love is for everybody to taste it with us, grab bottles from Botanist and Barrel, and then we're all going to open our bottles together on the Zoom virtual call on May 28th at 7 o'clock, and we can all taste it together and tell you the story of the wines.
Got it.
So if you want to be a part of the virtual tasting, it's going to happen on Thursday, May 28th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can click the link in the show notes of this show, but also look for all of the links in our Instagram and Facebook posts. Again, it's May 28th at 7 p.m.
It's going to be fun, but it's going to be more fun if you get some wine and join us. Make yourself some food and join along with us, and you'll eat and drink very merrily.
Thank you for listening to the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast, coming to you from the cozy comforts of our palatial homes. I'm Max's next-door neighbor, Brian Hoyle, and your host for the evening. They're here, your busy backyard bartenders, the masters of the takeout menu, the homeschooling, home distancing, Max Trujillo and Matthew Weiss.
Hello, and thank you for listening to the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. I am your co-host, Max Trujillo.
And I am your co-host, Matthew Weiss, and we continue our quarantine coverage. Thank you via Zoom. And today we have with us a man of many talents. You might have seen or read some of his work in the book Vinoburger, or you might have drank some of the wine that he procures at one of Matt Kelly's fine restaurants in Durham. Or you might have seen his artwork if you've ever gone onto the website of wineries such as Lyoko or Francesco Vira or Vira. We are joined by one very special Jeff Bramwell. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, gentlemen. Good to see you today in these very strange times.
Yeah, it's good to see you. So I noticed that you're rocking it's a goatee, but it's a little Tom Selleck mustache. Is that because of the quarantine? Like you thought you could get away with it or what?
I appreciate the very generous terminology in calling this a mustache. But I figured as long as we have 6 weeks, if I can't grow something in 6 weeks, then I can just officially never try again.
Right.
So this is what I got. This is what I got to show for it.
Yeah, it's very Tom Selleck of you.
It is,
nice.
Yeah.
My aunt would be swooning right now.
Who is that?
My
Who
aunt.
would be swooning?
Oh,
your aunt.
My Aunt Mary. Yeah, she's 76, but she would be super down right now.
Well, Tom Selleck, that's high praise. He had an iconic mustache.
Oh yeah.
I got to invest in some Hawaiian shirts.
Get yourself a Ferrari.
Yeah.
All right. So Jeff, where are you coming from in this quarantine?
So I am holed up at my house in the Brentwood neighborhood of Raleigh. So just used to live in downtown, but moved to the suburbs a couple of years ago. I was old enough, so they kicked me out of downtown for not being cool enough.
Yeah, I understand that.
So Jeff, currently, just to set you up here, you are a man of many talents. You run Matt Kelly's wine programs at St. James. Well, not currently, but
right.
Of course, pre-COVID.
Currently on hiatus, but
St. James, Mateo's, and Mothers and Sons, of course.
Correct.
But you have quite the Max. You might not know this, but actually, Jeff is my predecessor at the Country Vintner, which is now, of course, Winebow. He had pretty much my exact same route, 2 years before I started.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Then Matt's driven it into the ground.
I'm sure that's not the case.
Pretty much.
So I was at the Country Vintner for about 4.5 years before making a jump into photography full time. But that's it's been a pretty kind of fun but crazy meandering path through the wine industry over the past 15 or so years.
Yeah, and well, before that, I probably most notably, at least for me, is you were one of the original owners of the Raleigh Wine Shop.
Correct. Yeah. So Seth Hoffman, who's still there, and then Ryan Fulkerson, a guy that you might possibly know.
I know him well.
So the three of us started that off in, I guess it was early 2011 we opened. It was great. Had a nice run there. Partnerships are, they've got their challenges, and it might have been a few too many cooks in the kitchen. And, I might like to think that we were maybe a little ahead of the curve in bringing something to downtown that maybe people weren't totally ready to engage in, as fully as we'd hoped right out of the gate.
Yeah.
But, I know the shop is humming along, and it still has the same central vision that we had from opening. And, I think they're doing great. So everyone's happy.
For those that don't know, or you're listening outside of North Carolina or even outside of the Triangle, the Raleigh Wine Shop is, arguably the top wine shop, at least for fine wine, in the entire state. And probably sales wines, they're right behind the Chapel Hill Wine Company. I would think they're probably close. But if I can get, gossipy, for lack of a better.
Yeah, sure.
Ooh.
What I always wondered what happened there, because I know like you and Ryan remain close friends, and you guys are also still close friends with Seth. So like, I know partnerships just sometimes, people go their separate ways, but can you talk more about like why you guys wanted to do other stuff, or was it financially? What happened? And if you can't, that's cool.
Well, I think, of course. I think we had what I would consider to be like a very sort of noble mission for what we wanted to do at that shop. We didn't want to rely on a lot of press. We wanted to really taste everything, be able to speak with every customer, in as much detail as they wanted about whatever wines that they were curious about in the shop. We have a sort of rigorous standard for getting wines in there. We didn't just throw anything out the wall and see what stuck. And this was at a time, so 2011, it's kind of funny to think how much the wine world has changed in such a short time. We've seen the rise of natural wine, glue, if you're into that whole scene, like got orange wine. We've seen a lot of trends kind of pop up. And even just, 9 years ago when we were getting going, it feels like it was a very different landscape for wine at that point. And I think maybe we were just a touch ambitious for being, the new kids on the block on Glenwood. There was a perception that we were, that we had a difficult parking situation. And, unfortunately perception is reality so much of the time. So, it was a slow build, but we really wanted to do it on our terms. And I think that, Seth and James, the entire team that they've assembled, they have continued doing that on those same terms that we established. It just might have been, we were, perhaps a tiny bit ahead of the curve timing wise, for how the interest in handmade wine, in family crafted wines has really taken off over the past, 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. It's interesting. This is the first time in a long time that Matt and I have been on a call or an interview where all of us have all been a rep or a wine person at one time or another. I did it for about 7 years, and obviously Matt's currently doing it, and Jeff, you just finished doing it. And the industry, since I guess Matt, you probably have been in the business the longest. If we're looking at it that way, as a rep, because I think you were a rep even before I met you. You were just doing some part-time work for Pascal Wines or so, back in the day. That's going back to like '04, right when I think you and I met, or something around then. But the industry, and of course that was in Los Angeles, but the industry has evolved so much. So I stopped being a wine rep in 2013 when I moved to North Carolina. But it was for a good long while. And man, back then it seemed so simple. It seemed so like you had 8 or 9 major varietals and you had all the major countries that were represented. And I feel like that's the way it was for like 50 years previous up until then. And then since I feel like I got out of it, I feel like it's exploded, and the diversity in the new wine regions that are kind of like up and coming are now becoming just kind of constant. It's kind of like what you're saying as well, Jeff, to like the natural wine movements and orange wine movements. It's so it's so broad now, and there's so many different sectors. It's got to be challenging and also refreshing as a wine rep in itself to go to an account and just say like, hey, this is now new. This is something that everybody wants. Like, could both of you kind of speak to that?
Yeah, no, I think it's so weird to think about, a beverage that's been around for as long as it has. And we think like, oh, well, things don't change that fast with wine. Like you plant a vineyard with 25 to 50 years in mind. So how can these trends change so fast? And yet they really have. Just say 10 years ago when the Burgundy boom, like really, I mean, God, the prices just spiraled out of control on Burgundy, on Bordeaux, on so many of these blue chip wines and wine regions that were such the core of what wine professionals needed to know in order to be able to sell. And now, younger wine enthusiasts don't have the same access to those wines that even we had just 10 years ago. And so it's forced people to look at all these different areas that they can do what Burgundy can do, but at a tenth of the price. They kind of do what Bordeaux do, but you can actually, find and collect these and not have to pay in futures. The industry really has changed a ton. It's opened up a huge realm for experimentation with, new grapes, new regions. And it's really, it's a super exciting time to be where we're all at with wine. But it can definitely be a bit of a learning curve when you sort of rise through the ranks knowing like the classics are what you have to build your knowledge on. And that's kind of not necessarily a given anymore. You can go about it any way you want now.
It's so funny because it's so true what you said. I mean, there's two sides to every story, but there's the part where, it's so diverse, but at the same time, there's a part of me that's sad because these new wine buyers and the new people coming up in the industry, they really won't know the classics, or they won't know them as intimately because, like you said, when we were coming up through the ranks of the wine industry, you got to taste all this stuff. I mean, if you had worked like you worked in a restaurant, or you were, in Max, we would open bottles all the time and you got to taste it. But those things are just not available for tasting anymore. I mean, I'm sure still in the fine dining restaurants they are.
Right, but few and far between.
Few and far between, exactly. So, and I referenced this a couple of times on the show, but when Max was at Standard Foods, he asked me to help on the wine list. And my first instinct was, oh, let's go totally classic and just really hone in on the classic regions. Turns out, like, I was still new to the area and I could not have been more wrong. Like, people wanted anything but classic. If it was something that they hadn't heard of, that's what they wanted.
Well, and it was funny because even so, Fred Dexheimer, who many people in this area will know, he's a master sommelier, and now he's back up in New York. He also left to work for Winebow, I believe. So there's this episode not brought to you by Winebow, except for Matt's paycheck, of course. That personally is brought to no, but Fred Dex was he had the connotation of being the kind of the first master sommelier in the Carolinas, but he's gone now. So now we have Maximilian Cast, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So he is, and and he lives here. So we'll give props to Max as the only.
He's really homegrown.
Yeah. Although he's from
Max is great.
Isn't he from Montana?
He's from Montana, but he studied and worked here while he got it. Whereas Fred got his Master Sommelier, he passed it elsewhere and then came here. So.
Yeah. But with that said, Fred was running the original wine program there, and even he, the reason why I mention it is because he's a Master Sommelier, and of course that brings along the fact that you should probably know a lot about what's going on in the wine world. And he even said, well, I'm building a wine list for Raleigh, so let's go Chardonnay heavy, and we're going to do a lot of this and a lot of that. And he knew that, or he found out right after he opened, even though he had such an eclectic chef, like he had Scott Crawford pushing the envelope and doing things that most people aren't doing, and just like a funky atmosphere in general. It was a really interesting vibe there. He couldn't sell. No one wanted the Chardonnays. That was the last thing to sell. And when we inherited the list, we had like 18 different Chardonnays on the list. We're like, oh my God, how are we going to get rid of all these? And so, but yet we couldn't stop selling the I don't know, like Mediterranean island wines, or like just something off color. And
Listan Negro, yeah.
Yeah. But that was also around that time where In Pursuit of Balance was really starting to make a lot of headway with a lot of people that were, kind of in the know with, wanting to find some new side of California. And so Jasmine Hirsch and Raj Parr, they really were hugely instrumental in leading that charge, that now it's now good luck finding a super over extracted, oaky, buttery Chardonnay. It's really hard to find. I mean, of course they're out there.
It'll come back though. It'll come back in vogue,
Yeah, the pendulum, for sure. The pendulum will swing.
Yeah,
absolutely, it has to.
People are like, when is that cake bread Chardonnay going to come back?
That changed just in this very short lifespan of the past, 10 to 15 years that we're talking about.
So, Jeff, this is a really good segue, because something that I had really wanted to ask you was
about ehungry.com. Is that what you were going to ask? Because usually your segues are so great, Matt. Because if you wanted to, if you own a restaurant and were looking for mobile and online ordering, give eHungry a try. That's ehungry.com. They work with thousands of restaurants and charge ridiculously low fees, like 1.9% on every order. So let your customers order online for carry-out, delivery, catering, and more. And right now, if you sign up with the NCFB podcast code, you will get 60 days free as a trial period by visiting ehungry.com/NCFB. And we all know right now, takeout is king. No one's allowed outside their house. So you're going to be calling up, you're going to be emailing your orders, you're going to expect delivery or going out and getting curbside pickup. So if you're a business owner, use ehungry.com and save some money and produce some revenue.
Make some money, yeah.
Yeah.
Jeff, when let Chef Matt Kelly know when you guys get back in business that eHungry is the way to go. It costs you basically nothing.
Absolutely.
Everything. What I did want to talk to you about was you and I. So we talked about it. I deal with you. I sell wine to you, and you strike me as somebody who has a really good balance in terms of knowing what you like, but also buying for the customer. And I think that's something that's really lost, unfortunately, on many buyers. I want to say the young buyers, but even some older, even more established buyers, they buy what they like, and they only buy what they like. So talk to me a little bit about that and how you find that balance and how you find about what other consumers, guests are drinking and liking.
Well, I mean, I'd like to think that part of that is just me being me to begin with, but I definitely think a huge part of that would have to be the pretty unique role that I've got at Matt's Restaurants, where I'm a really rare breed in that I'm a daytime employee there. I handle a huge chunk of the wine program there, but I'm rarely the one that's actually there on the floor selling.
Right.
So just buying my favorites doesn't do anyone any good. I mean, of course, I am buying some favorites because I think they're fantastically made wines, and I believe they work. I believe they will work. But if I put something out there that I think is a great wine that it totally strikes my fancy, but no one latches onto it at the restaurants, then that doesn't do anyone any good. That's just taking up space. That's just another wine that's going to collect dust. So I really try to be intelligent about knowing where does a wine stand, within the context of its own category, its sellability for the price, its accessibility flavor-wise, every bit of that. But ultimately, if the staff doesn't get excited about it, then my interest in that wine isn't going to do anyone any good.
What's the timeline on something like that? Like if you bring on something new and it takes you, I don't know, if it takes us 2 months to move this case, we're not bringing it back. Or if it takes us 2 weeks to move this case, we're not bringing it back. Like, is there a timeline or just perceived enthusiasm?
I wouldn't say that there's a real hard and fast rule with that. With by the glass selections, I've definitely seen a pattern where, something can get hot right away once it comes in. And if it's still hot, 3-4 weeks after it's been introduced to the program, that seems to be the kind of the marker that, like, yes, this is going to catch on. With bottle selections, it's definitely a little bit looser in that it depends on how quickly we can get around to tasting everything, because especially with me not being there at all 3 restaurants every night, of course nowhere close to that, then really staff education, tasting, like that is just hugely central to the role that I'm playing there. So it depends on how quickly everyone gets an opportunity to try things, and not everybody needs to latch on to everything, but hopefully as we're tasting through things, 2, 3, 4 servers at any given restaurant say, like, oh, that's really cool, I'll sell that. And everyone can kind of carve out their own little sub portfolio from within the restaurant of the things that I'm throwing at them, so that they've all got their whether it's 6 or 12 or 20 wines that they like having as their go-tos. And if there's not a massive amount of overlap between servers, then everything kind of gets its fair share. If through all of that, a wine still isn't really, sticking with people, then that's a sign that we can probably free that spot up and move on to something else once it sells through.
And just to talk like wine and menu design for a little bit longer, one thing is, I know you take extensive notes.
Yeah.
What's like your guideline for note taking?
Not a huge guideline. If it's something like, Pinot Noir, Sangiovese, Nebbiolo, Cabernet, Chardonnay, like where it's got a pretty established track record of what it's, pretty much supposed to taste like I don't feel any need to ever note like, oh, it tastes like red cherry with Pinot Noir. Like if it doesn't have that, then there's probably something a little bit wrong with that wine.
Right.
So usually what I'm taking notes on is, texture, balance, whether I think, if there's oak, whether that's overplayed, things like that.
And how do you do it? Do you take it on a Excel spreadsheet, or do you
I think I've migrated to Google Sheets these days. But that's the thing that we started back at the Raleigh Wine Shop, was the 3 of us would we'd get our laptops out, we'd all have an Excel spreadsheet, and I know that we maybe had the reputation for like, you had to run the gauntlet and get all 3 of us to like a wine, and that was challenging. But we had our spreadsheets. It's a thing I still continue now, but it's a great way to just be able to reference back to everything, and hopefully not have a big collection of papers. Anything we can do to reduce the amount of paper that we're using is obviously a great thing.
Oh, I used to always love when I had to sell wine to a place and you had to get approval from 3 owners at one time to make it happen.
Yeah, no, we were great. Everybody loved us.
I'll tell you what, when I was selling in my previous role to the Raleigh Wine Shop, I'll give a shout out to Liz Oliveri, because
she's great.
Now, despite like James might not like a wine and Seth might really like a wine, or they both might not, but if Liz was excited about it, somehow it would get passed through.
Yeah.
Oh, she was the we used to,
enthusiasm is king in what we do.
Remember, in sales, we always say there are gatekeepers and key holders. Isn't that right? I think isn't that the term? It sounds very Ghostbusters-ish.
The key master and the gatekeeper.
Yeah. The key master. Yeah, because it's like there are people that you, as a wine rep, you would perceive was the person that had all the decision-making abilities, and you're like, okay, yeah, cool. I've got this great relationship that I've been working out with the bar manager, always kind to me, always gives me an appointment and all this. And then you find out later on, you got that appointment because that bar manager just loves drinking alcohol and likes your company and doesn't really have any ability. So you're like, I just wasted not just an hour, but like 7 hours because I came here 7 times and trying to get my wine on the list to find out that really it's the general manager or the chef that really makes all the decisions. And I've just been spinning my wheels over here. decisions. That's
Yeah.
Wine Rep 101 is find out who the decision maker is before you spend any real time on anything.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm sure we probably were a little frustrated to deal with at times at the Raleigh Wine Shop because of like that what we consider to be a very high standard for what we wanted to sell. I like to think we're all good guys and we were pretty fair about everything, but I'm sure there were a couple of times where people had some colorful language for us after they left.
I want to ask you something that's a little bit more on the political side, because I think that both you and Matt will have an answer for this. But I do want to tee it up before we get into a sponsorship read. We've been talking about the wine tariff situation with what's going to happen and what has already happened with increasing taxes on wines that are being imported. But now through this global epidemic that we're seeing, I wonder what the status will be moving forward. But think about it right now. We're going to take a quick little break to talk about the Folks Foundation. The Folks Foundation, who are champions of all good things crafted in North Carolina and the folks that make them, are a 501c3 nonprofit through ongoing grants and their publication, the Folks Journal, and their soon-to-be new general store in downtown historic New Bern. They feature amazing products from people that design, whether it's art or music or a podcast or products that you can pick up at your local stores, to food and wine. Go visit the folksfoundation.org. They are really doing what we are doing in a different medium, and they really are a fantastic group. So once again, go to folksfoundation.org to learn more. And we just recently had Randy Lewis of Ran Lou Dairy on, and he graced the cover of the Folks Journal about 2 issues ago. So you can always hear what Randy had to say about his dairy farm, and you can read about what they talked about in an extensive article a couple episodes ago. So folksfoundation.org. But now that we're back, and I've given you enough time to think about this, I know that before we had this shutdown and lockdown and quarantine, the biggest hot button conversation about the wine industry was the impending tariffs that are going to hit us, to where they could have been 100% of a tariff. Like basically anything you bought for $20 before would now basically be $40, and thus pricing out any reasonably priced high-end wine for any particular wine list. Do we have any information? Do we know anything about what's happening now?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, here we are, it's just the beginning of April, and it's like, this has already been the longest year ever. I mean, leaving the actual, political beliefs in the background, we've been through a lot already. For those of us in the wine world, the tariff situation should have been, the big frightening story of this year. The fact that the coronavirus popped up as it did and just completely made that seem like peanuts in comparison is crazy. And, God, I hope things get back on track after this. We should be set up for a nice, smooth, easy run for the rest of the year, right? But no, so prior to the situation that we're in now, the tariff situation was, it was setting up to be an industry killer. Now,
Matt, would you just explain to everybody that doesn't understand what this is? Because I know you know it fairly well. Just give us a quick idea of what this tariff situation was going to be.
So it's based on a trade war between the United States and Europe, and essentially, just to be real simple, where we are taxing imported wines right now, it's somewhere in there, I think the 7 to 12% area. They were basically, the initial things, this did happen, they went to 25%, and that was anything below 14% alcohol. So, and not bubbles. So thankfully champagne or any sparkling wines didn't change. But then there was a referendum on the table that would be raised to charging 100% on any imported wines from Europe, but mainly Spain, Germany, France, and then Italy came in later. Those at least
basically
have been
all main wine growing regions.
Yeah, those at least have been halted for 1 year, and now with the global pandemic pandemic, who knows? So you probably have noticed that there has been a 25% increase in a lot of your favorite French wines or some Italian wines. However, a lot of wholesalers and importers and wineries came together to kind of mitigate a little bit of their own profit in order to hold prices somewhat steady.
Yeah, and unfortunately, my cohort Ted at Van Rouge has had to deal with that, sooner and more seriously than I had to. I feel really bad for him having to navigate all that. But yeah, we didn't see a ton of price increase at the 3 restaurants that I'm a part of. But we were on the precipice of, as Matt was saying, like things just doubling overnight. And the sort of snowball effect of those fears, really, even though this thing got shelved until, approximately next year, we're still feeling the effects of just the threat of it, where supply chains were disrupted. People stopped bringing containers of wine in because they didn't know whether their tax bill was going to be based on the 25% tariff or 100% tariff, and they just couldn't run the risk of having all of a sudden this massive tax bill come due the moment that their container arrives. So even though we haven't seen that, that worst case scenario, we've still, we've been out of wines. We've seen people pump the brakes on bringing other stuff in general, because this threat has not gone totally. And people might have been led to believe that this was just a thing with European wine, but the reality is it affects all the winemakers here in the U.S. because they need a healthy distribution network to get their wines all throughout the country. It's the farmers in Europe. It's all the people that we've grown to know and love so much through this industry. It would touch absolutely everybody: the restaurateurs, the sales reps, the delivery drivers, the warehouse logistics personnel, accountants, graphic designers for wine labels. I mean, it goes on and on and on. The number of jobs that that have been impacted and would be substantially more impacted if this thing does come to fruition. So right now, we're happily in a bit of a holding pattern with that, and we just have to hope that it kind of goes away.
It's interesting, though, at this point, whether it was the virus or the tariffs or anything else for that matter, just global economy, it feels like we were trending towards effectively shopping back home as much as possible, because whether it was going to be these European wines were going to be priced out of the market, or we just don't have access to them given the current state, it means that there's going to be much more pressure, and hopefully in a positive realm, more job creation and more internal focus on American soil to just basically shop local and shop internally. In a positive light, maybe that means that we have more jobs for Americans, and that means that we're doing a whole lot more here. The only thing I'll say that doesn't make sense in this whole scenario is wine is not wine like the way blue jeans or like a hamburger is. You can't get this same type of wine here in the States. Hell, you can't get the same type of wine here in our state in North Carolina as you could in New York, California, or Oregon. Therefore, not even close to Sancerre or Puglia. So I think there's kind of this kind of arrogant and ignorant point of view that was expressed by our president that kind of said, well, we'll just buy American wine from this point on. It's like, well,
right.
Yeah, but America doesn't make Burgundy or Sancerre. Like, we can't produce that because it only comes from one area. And, and this is me on my soapbox, but homie doesn't drink, so why does he care?
Right. Yeah. And if you ask any of the, California, Washington, Oregon winemakers that we're all friendly with, what they drink at home, they're drinking an awful lot of European wine.
Yeah.
The people that ostensibly stand to benefit from that tariff situation are not in favor of it. So that should definitely tell you something. The California winemakers, they want to see a robust, healthy industry. They do not want to see, Matt Weiss or any other sales rep losing their job because there's not enough wine to go around. I think the worldwide consumption of wine is already on pace to well outstrip supply. And so if you take that out of the supply chain for the U.S., it's not a thing that's going to help the industry one bit.
By the way, just a funny anecdote, and and forgive me if this isn't even true, but I just heard this from somebody, but it's just kind of a funny story. In this whole quarantine situation, somebody told me that in Colorado, the governor mandated that, with the shutting down of non-essential businesses, that alcohol and pot dispensaries were also going to be shut down because they weren't essential businesses, quote unquote. And apparently that lasted for all of 2 hours because the people all flooded the streets and went freaked out. And so they had to repeal that real fast, because basically what he said was, we're going to go through prohibition in our state. And that's, as we all know, probably one of the most liberal states when it comes to personal freedoms. And I like that the people motivated and changed everyone's mind in that situation, if it is true exactly as to how I heard it. But that is still something that is great about our country. And I think if we're pissed off enough, we all can make a stink about it and kind of hold the things the most true that what we want. And if we want Sancerre and Burgundy and Bordeaux and Barolo and we want to pay a fair price, I'm sure there's a way that we can push through that as Americans.
Hey, Max, guess where you can get a fair price for Burgundy and Barolo and Sancerre?
Raleigh Wine Shop?
You can get it at the Raleigh Wine Shop, but if you want to get a discount, you can get it at the Triangle Wine Company, and they have 4 locations. So you can get it anywhere pretty much in Holly Springs, Morrisville, and their flagship in Cary, way out in Southern Pines. They have your Barolos, your Burgundies, your Sancerres, your Bordeaux, whatever. They're great guys. They're family-owned business, and they're keeping the lights on during this time and during this quarantine. They will deliver to you. They've really ramped up their curbside delivery. They have $100 to-go cases, mixed match of some genre. So they're really they're not tone deaf during this time. And so buy your quarantine wine from Triangle Wine Company.
Ooh.
Use the NCFB promo code and you will get 10% off.
Quarantine?
Max, say again?
Someone's got to release a quarantine.
Quarantine. Max, you mentioned something about hamburgers, and our guest here, Jeff, knows a thing or two about hamburgers, because Vinoburger is all about writing recipes and pairing wine with hamburgers. So, Jeff, you never talk about this. I've known you for a good amount of time, and you never talk about the book. So,
yeah, well, I mean, I like to hold on to the mantle of world's worst self-promoter, and so,
Okay.
not talking about any of the stuff that I do is a prime way to do that.
Okay.
So, honestly, it frankly feels like almost a lifetime ago.
When did that book come out?
Conveniently enough, right around the time that we were opening the shop. It was just, it was crazy. 2011. And so basically it started off as just, like a fun little idea of taking, I think the first thing I did was taking the flavors of cassoulet without, having the patience or the know-how to make a proper cassoulet at home, but just taking those flavors and putting them all together in burger form. And I was like, oh, well, so of course I want a Provençal wine to go with that burger. And it was really tasty. It was a combination of duck and pork, and it was topped with bacon and white onion and a tapenade and a white bean puree and just all these delicious things. And so I was like, oh, well, that's a really iconic dish from a wine region. So obviously it should go with that wine. And then I started thinking what other regions have these super signature dishes that could be reinterpreted as a burger. And so I think I got through 4 or 5 of these burger ideas. I was like, well, this is going to peter out in no time. This is a pamphlet at best. But I just kept going, kept researching, putting together lists of ingredients that are authentic to each region, and just slowly but surely getting through. I think it ended up being 36 regions. And I think I tested each recipe an average of 9 times. So, you do the math on the calories of that project, and you understand why I spent a lot of time on an exercise bike for the years that followed. But so then I thought that, telling a story along with the recipes was really important. And I was not quite as well traveled then as I am now. So I reached out to my buddy Jay Murray, who at the time I was a wholesale rep for either Prestige or Bordeaux Fine and Rare, like way back. And Jay was the buyer at Southern Season. We'd hit it off, even though, I was with Prestige because I didn't have much of a portfolio to sell him, and he still bought from me. It's like, that's the mark of a good guy. Because I had a really marginal book, and he still bought from me. But so he did a lot of the narrative on the wine regions themselves. I think his write-up on Burgundy will absolutely make you want to drink Burgundy like the moment you start reading that.
It doesn't take much to make you want to start drinking Burgundy.
No, absolutely not. Yeah. But so we kept plugging away. I think it ended up being about a 4-year process in total. But so released it in 2011. My mom actually did the photography on it, and that's actually what kind of re-kick-started my interest in photography. I was a film major in college, but I put the camera on the back burner for the longest time. And working on that with her, where I sort of did the food styling and she did the actual photography, that got me interested in doing photography again, which definitely translated into, this newer, more current life that I've got post cookbook.
Well, that's an awesome transition, because I did want to speak to you about your photography real quick, because you're the worst promoter of your own product. I'll do it for you. In searching right now, if you go on Amazon, it looks like there are just a few books left on Amazon if you wanted to buy Vinoburger. But then since we're all quarantined and we're all inside, probably the best way to do it is to just get it from iTunes or so, get the iBook version of it, which I'm looking at it. It's only, you have 5 different chapters that are released, and they're only $1.99 a book. So that's like the best way to pass the time. You want to learn a little bit about different areas. You've got you have chapters on Sonoma, you have Washington, Tuscany, Piedmont, and Provence. I don't know if I'm missing any, but that's what I see when I look up here.
And then there's some fun stuff you can click on. A buddy of mine did a voiceover pronouncing all the grapes and the regions, so you can get the proper pronunciation without what I consider like the falsified European accent that can be a little obnoxious when harnessed too heartily. It's a fun little interactive experience.
Well, but let's, as one that's married to a food photographer myself, I am curious how that came to be for you. As you said, you jumped kind of back into it. Your mother's a photographer, as we just learned, and you were doing some of the stylings. But I know how my wife connected with photography. She was once a wedding photographer, and then because I was involved in food, she just kind of saw what I was doing and then really got inspired from there. But I'd love to know a little bit about your journey as becoming a photographer and how it related to you in food and wine.
Yeah, so in May of 2012, I went and did a trip through Paris, Champagne, Provence. I got down to the Piedmont of Italy for the first time and over into Verona. So it was about a 2-week trip. I took all of my mom's camera gear with me. And I mean, I was horribly outclassed by that gear. Like, I was using it as a point and shoot, and that stuff was definitely not point and shoot. So I look back on that material and it's a little cringeworthy. But it got my interest peaked in getting back into photography. And so over the course of like any upcoming wine trip, whether it was actually a work thing or just vacation time, I would take the camera with me everywhere I would go. Over the course of the next few years, I started realizing like this is really the way that I'm passionate about telling the story of wine. I was working for Country Vintner that I think this entire time, and went on a handful of trips, got to know so many awesome people throughout these trips, and not to knock wholesale or retail or anything like that, but telling the story of the people of the place through photography really became the way that I connected with things. It really finally all came together. So it was late 2017. I did leave that wholesale job. I was coming up on the mile marker of turning 40 years old. I felt like this was the sort of like last chance I had to take a bit of a risk. So I left that job. I anticipated I'd probably get some part-time job in the wine business, and I would have to take whatever wedding photography gig could come along. Like I just figured I'd have to do anything and everything to stay busy. But that's when I hooked up with the team at Lyoko, where I went out there just to photograph harvest, because in this business, we're always super busy in September, October, November. Like, getting out to actually witness a harvest is really tough in this business. But so I was recently unencumbered by employment. So I headed out to California.
Nice way to say
I photographed a harvest with Lyoko and sent them the photos. After the dust settled from them, getting grapes in, getting fermentations going, they took a look at the pictures and they're like, dude, this is great stuff. Like, you're a professional now. Don't do this for free ever again. We're going to send you a bunch of wine. And that was just a huge confidence booster. Like, I really owe so much to Matt and Sarah Licklider for the confidence they gave me to know that I could forego a lot of those initial steps that I anticipated having to go through to start working with these really fantastic wineries. And so I just jumped right into it. And I was fortunate enough to get hooked up with Sylvia Altare at her family's winery, L.A. Altare, Treda Berry in Barolo, Azalea in Barolo. So it just took off kind of out of nowhere. Like, it still is kind of astounding to me.
Well, it's really cool to connect with Lyoko. I don't know if you knew this about me, but I know Matt Licklider, Sarah Licklider very well, Sarah Hansen back in the day, and and Kevin O'Connor, who is the Oko of Lyoko from the beginning, and he was an advanced level sommelier at Spago. I worked for Wolfgang Puck for 5.5 years, and Kevin was there for a long time, and we would just kind of see each other from time to time. But in my previous life, when I was a wine rep, I represented Lyoko in California. I sold a shit ton of Lyoko because that was my favorite wine in our book. So it kind of showed. So all my bosses knew, like, your sales of Kendall Jackson have dwindled, but your sales of Lyoko are through the roof. Like, I wonder why. One's awesome. And then there's the other one. But
one is made by people.
I wanted to say, just kind of thinking about that and being in the moment, as a therapist might say, be in the moment, be in the moment. What is in your glass right now? You're sipping on something, and I want to know what a wine guy is drinking at this very moment.
Well, I never leave the Piedmont roots too far behind. Friend of the podcast, JeanYves IRA, Francesca Vira, Dolcetto Coste Fossati from JeanYves IRA. Obviously, you guys had Francesca on. She's fantastic. These guys are another photography client of mine, and they're just fantastic people. They just posted something on Instagram today about donating 5% of the proceeds from the sales of their Albe Barolo to the Restaurant Workers Relief Fund here in the U.S. So, shout out to those guys. They've always been world class. They continue to be world class. I love to drink their wines. I love to support good people.
Heck yeah. Matt, are you drinking any wine right now?
Yeah.
He's got some Kendall Jackson right now, folks. Vineyards Reserve.
I'm just hydrating right now, for now, in preparing for drinking some wine later. But,
yes.
Jeff, this is what I want to know. You mentioned it before, and those burgers sound delicious. I have a question about the recipes, but you are a guy, to get personal for a second. You revealed to me that at some point, before I met you, you had lost a lot of weight. How does one do that being in the food and beverage business?
Oh boy,
give us your secrets.
There was a time when I had restraints, and it lasted about like maybe 6 months. No, it's tough. Obviously, I can't advocate for not enjoying great food and wine, and I never cut that out of the lifestyle. I just minimized how much real estate it took up in my habits. So I cleaned up the routine for a while. Ate a lot of kale salads, rode the stationary bike quite a bit, and didn't drink quite as much wine as I had been accustomed to.
Was it like, okay, I'm going to cut from X amount of glasses to Y amount of glasses, or I'm going to not drink on these nights, or how give us the insider tips? People are
well, I definitely cut alcohol, not out, but I cut it back. But I started off with a bunch of just like really rapid fire, but small adjustments. Like, first was just cutting out sugar and dairy from coffee, weaning myself back to just black coffee as quickly as I could. I eventually got to where the only thing I would drink outside of wine would be water, black coffee, unsweetened tea, just cutting out unnecessary sugar and dairy, lots of exercise bike, lots of kale salads. I always want to drink wine, so dressing those salads with things like, lots of spice, lots of vinegar, things that are not wine friendly per se, to where it's like, okay, I can have water with this salad because wine is not going to be good with it.
Clever. That's clever.
There was that.
That's a good tip.
Yeah, just cut out all fast food. I haven't had fast food in years, but I also didn't deny myself the stuff I wanted to have. So like, if I wanted to go to Vin Rouge and just like light it up, I was going to light it up. I was going to eat and drink everything I wanted to, but then I would be really good for the next few days about not repeating that. Then I would tighten up quite a bit after that. But I think it was a lifestyle change. It wasn't a diet. So like I've never denied myself the foods and the wine that I want to consume. Just do it in greater moderation than I once did.
Yeah, and you lost like 40 pounds or something, right?
At one point I'd gotten down 70 pounds. I've gotten some of that back thanks to quarantine time here. Yeah, eating, drinking like a champ right now. But at one point I was down 70 pounds. So wow. I got a little bit of it back, but it's not too bad.
That's fantastic.
It's impressive.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
I do want to say, and perhaps this is something where Matt will have to hand deliver this when he can get back to you when we're all out in the wild or so. But I do want to mention our last sponsor of the show, who is fantastic and is actually, I think, doing quite well with the given situation. And I'm talking about Proof Alcohol Ice Cream. It's an ice cream that has alcohol infused in every pint, up to 7% ABV, no less. So that's kind of like a pretty strong IPA if you look at it. Proof Alcohol Ice Cream, coming out of Columbia, South Carolina, is made with fresh ingredients. They infuse all the big flavors that you're used to, like coconut rum flavors or bourbon caramel, strawberry moonshine. You can get everything you'd like at Triangle Wine Company, who we mentioned before, but now they're also distributed in all of the big stores in this area, such as Lowe's and Harris Teeter. So if you're looking for it, check them out. I think they're still in their iconic red-wrapped freezer. Because I think like legally they might have to like not be in the same section where you get your Cherry Garcia, just because a kid might grab it. But look for Proof Alcohol Ice Cream. Think differently about dessert and pick up something. When you buy some Proof Alcohol Ice Cream, snap a picture, share it in your stories, and tag us. Let us know that you're drinking and eating simultaneously. We'd love to know that. Matt, what else do you got out there?
I want to say that, Jeff, thank you for coming on during this time and giving us a little sense of, as we like to say, normalcy. And I will say that for everybody out there, please at this time do go support your local shop because they'll keep the lights on for the wine business. As you were talking about before, and not to like cry me a river, but North Carolina in particular has been a rough start to the year in the wine business because not only do you have the tariff situation, the scare of the 100% tariff situation, but then also North Carolina went to enforcing a bottle one pricing structure, which means that volume really decreased for a lot of people in terms of sales. And if anybody needs me to further explain that, DM me at Weiss Wine, but I'll be happy to. It's really important at this time that you buy retail, buy wine from your restaurant when you're getting takeout as well, because most of them are selling bottles of wine to go as well. Also, Jeff, thanks again. Go to one of Matt Kelly's restaurants. You'll drink wonderfully from one of either at the menu at St. James, which we didn't even get to talk about, is eclectic from all over the world. And then Mateo's, obviously, you've continued that legacy of great Spanish wine and sherry. And then Mothers and Sons is a beacon of an Italian wine list as well. So everybody out there, go to those places. You will eat and drink very merrily.
Thanks for listening to the NC F&B podcast. And if you've stuck with us this long, review us on iTunes and remember, 5 stars are encouraged.